Thanks to Nancy for getting some more copies for the lesson that we'll be doing today. The goldenrod one is for next week, Lord willing, and Professor permitting. I want to look at the last verses in chapter 9 before we move on into chapter 10 and 11. First of all, in 26, blessed be Yahweh. Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem. In many ways, that sort of sums up everything that has been going on in chapter 9. We talked about the idea of the covenant with Noah. That here is Yahweh. Here is the great I am. And I think we need a liver marker. Remember what I've said before, repetition is the soul of education. If I hadn't said that before, repetition is the soul of education. The consonants here are YHWH, and the lead consonants are those three, which are the verb to be. And this is probably a sentence. This is probably a verbal form. And it can be either he is or he who causes to be. Either one could be, but these vowels are guesses. We do not know what the vowel was, because when the Hebrew people came to put in vowels, which was 500 or 600 years after Christ, they put in the vowels of the word Adonai. Adonai means Lord, because by this time they did not want to say the personal name of God, which I think is rather remarkable, because God wants to be known on a first name basis. But there it is. And it's rather amusing to me today. One Jewish scholar, who, as far as I can tell, is not a believer, when he writes in English, he will write to which I say, who cares? But that's what's going on here, and that's why Martin Luther, when he did the first vernacular translation of the Old Testament since the time of Christ, his German translation, the first translation of the Old Testament into a vernacular language, he wrote, a beautiful name for God that never existed. Because in German, that consonant is pronounced J, and that consonant is pronounced V. That's what happened. And so I say all that to say, when you see the Lord in your English Bible spelled that way with small caps, it represents the name. When you see it written with lowercase, it just represents the word Adonai. But again, personally, Lord suggests boss. Master. Yahweh is God's personal name, the one who is, the one who exists. And again, it's a very powerful statement. We look at this. You can't say that. I can't say that. I am. No. Because every human being is dependent. None of us exists in ourselves. None of us brought ourselves into existence. This person says yes. I am. Have been, am, will be. Okay, so here in this chapter, we have seen this Yahweh, this one who exists in himself, who needs nothing, needs no one, binding himself to human beings. Why does he do this? Because of who he is. So, yes, Kevin.
Is I am and he is, are they equivalent, or is that you saying?
Thank you. That's a good point. Moses says, hey, you want me to go to Egypt? I don't even know your name. God says, my name is yeah. Here are our consonants again. But now it's a first person verb. I am. So God named himself, I am. They then say, he is. They're not the same. No. Ehya and Yahweh are two different verbs on the same root. I am and he is. So they're basically not saying of themselves, I am. They're saying he is the I am. The Hebrew looks like this. You can be my straight man anytime, James. Mm-hmm. The V and the Y are interchangeable. So this is that. This is that. This is, whoops, not far enough. And this one is the repetition. This one is a Y. Okay, back to chapter 9.
Theory that I heard from somewhere anyway, that the Jewish rabbi was being asked about God's name, and his answer of what this means was to Moses was, "I'll be there."
Yep. Yeah. So again, verse 26. Praise be to Yahweh, the God of Shem. That's going to be important, I think, when we look at chapter 10 in just a moment. But now let's go on. May Canaan be the slave of Shem. May God extend Japheth's territory. May Japheth live in the tents of Shem, and may Canaan be the slave of Japheth. Okay, remember we talked about the three families, the Japhethite, which is Indo-European, the Shemites, which are Semitic, and Ham, which is a bit questionable, particularly because Canaan is not an Afro-Asian group, which the rest of H seem to be. And that's rather important because unfortunately, this verse was used to justify slavery in the United States. But it's wrong because Canaan is not African. So when you talk about Canaan being a slave, whatever that means, and I'll offer a suggestion in a minute, you're not talking about Africans. Canaan is in fact Semitic. Now, I think what's going on, as I tried to suggest last week, is you're not really talking at this point about family descent. You're really talking about worldview. You're really talking about that understanding of reality, which Canaan represents as the anti-biblical one. And so in that sense, what this verse is saying, and I think it's awfully interesting, Japheth Gentiles are going to live where? What's the verse say?
And Tents of Shem.
And brothers and sisters, that's what we're doing today. We are sharing the tent that God gave to the Jewish people. We're sharing the faith that he gave to them. And then I think, what's this business about Canaan being a slave? I think it is that the pagan worldview has been brought under the worldview that God gave to the descendants of Shem. As James says, we're sliding back into paganism now, but nevertheless, for all of thus far recorded history, and it'd be interesting to see how much longer Jesus lets this mess live, that has been the case. So, the Gentiles have come under, by God's grace, the tent of Shem, and Canaan has been brought into submission to that worldview. Okay, any questions or comments there? Have I confused you totally? Not totally, okay. All right. When we look at chapter 10, we see not a vertical genealogy, but we see a horizontal genealogy. And that is, here are all the various descendants of Japheth. Here are all the various descendants of Ham. And finally, here are all the various descendants of Shem. Now, I want to call your attention to, in chapter 10, verse 25. This tells us something. It tells us that chapters 10 and 11 are out of chronological order. Mm-hmm. Chapter 10 assumes the division of languages. In other words, Babel occurred there. So we want to ask, why is that? Why has Babel, the division of languages, historically, chronologically, occurred before chapter 10? So what do you think? There was a theological purpose. Give that man a gold star.
That was, I don't know. That's why you're on there and I'm down.
Yes. So what did we have in chapter 9? We had Noah coming out of the ark. We had the tragedy of the evidence that sin had not been expurgated. And now we have in chapter 10, Noah's descendant. Concluding with Shem. And that's going to be significant. So what we've got basically is Noah and the covenant, and then Noah's descendants. Descendants. Yeah. So we've got a literary flow from there to there, particularly concluding with Shem. So that purpose is literary. You're just telling the story. And you're telling it in such a way that it's going to conclude with this one particular son. In the middle of that, then, there occurred this other event, which was quite a significant event. But you're not going to interrupt that literary flow. You're going to put it, and theologically, as somebody said, we're going to conclude the theological account with that very significant event. So that's what's going on, I think, why they're not in chronological order. We're not telling a chronological story, we're telling a theological story.
Doctor,
Yes, ma'am. Please do.
expurgated me.
What does the word expurgated mean? Torn out and destroyed. We haven't solved the sin problem. The flood did not solve the sin problem. And I think in many ways, God did that on purpose to show us. No, you're not going to solve the sin problem by getting everybody to act nice. Somehow, you're going to have to deal with something on a much deeper level. And it's interesting that that begins in such an odd way with chapter 12. Okay. I think that's everything I wanted to say about chapter 10. Anything else you want to ask about? A lot of fascinating questions about who are these people. Answer, we don't know.
Just
On the side,
Please.
Canaan's name is that where the name of Canaan, the place?
Yes.
Is? I mean, it's just.
Yes, yes,
So, all right.
yes, yes, yeah, yeah. And again, we historically, we first know about these people and this region and I think I mentioned this last time. The Egyptian heretic king was Akhenaton. He's called the first monotheist in history. He wasn't. He was a bitheist. I'll tell you what that means in a minute. So at this point, Egypt had been in existence for about roughly 2,700 years. As I said to you earlier, when Abraham and Sarah went to Egypt, they took tourist camels out to see the pyramids. The pyramids were already 800 years old. Abraham was not an aborigine coming out of a cave hollering ugh. So you had in this period of time the immense growth of gods, thousands and thousands of gods, a god for everything you can imagine, including dung beetles, which are scarabs. That's a god. A very valuable god because a dung beetle knows how to turn manure into life. Dung beetles plant their eggs in balls of manure, and out of the manure comes life. That's a key thing to know. Anyway, during this time, the priests of the sun god, and the sun god has about 5 different names, but the priests of the sun god are becoming more and more powerful. The main god at this point, his name was Amun-Re. This is dangerous because I did my thesis on this. So anyway, so what happens pretty clearly is this guy says, hold it. The prestige of the king is declining while the prestige of the priest is rising. So we're going to get rid of all the gods and we're going to worship the sun disk. And that's what that name means. It means disk. Compact atoms. Anyway. Well, prior to this, this is too long. Anyway, prior to this, Egypt had ruled the whole coast of what is today Palestine, all the way up to Turkey. He said, I'm not interested in any of that. And he pulled back. And when he did, the scum showed up. That's what that word apiru means. Outcasts. And the kings of Canaan were writing desperately to Akhenaton, and we found his file cabinet. We don't have any return letters from him, but these guys are all writing desperately, help us, help us. The scum are coming and are going to take over. Well, Linguistically, those two words are the same. Anyway, long answer to your question, Joe. That's when Canaan first shows up in these letters from these kings from Canaan writing to Egypt saying, please come help us.
So the name was developed in that correspondence? That's
Yeah.
the first time they
Yeah.
saw
Yeah.
that name.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yes.
In the reading of all this in the last few weeks, it seems to me too that God is making a particular instance here of letting us know where the Canaanites came from when the direction to all the Israelites when they were brought out of Egypt was to completely destroy. the
Yeah.
Canaanites.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And you wonder why, and if you come back where it's clearly written.
Here it
you
is.
begin to see.
Yeah. Okay. Chapter 11. 20 minutes. Okay.
Those weren't related to the children of Israel, were they those particular?
Well, they could be. We have no historical evidence that they were, but the fact that the names are linguistically the same. Now, I think it's very possible that what's happening is when the Egyptians pull back, you've got societal collapse, and all the outcasts of any sort are part of it. So I suspect this bunch was a lot bigger than this bunch, but that this bunch was part of this one. Now, it's very interesting. There are only two people in the Bible who call the Israelites Hebrews: the Egyptians and the Philistines. It's pretty clearly a pejorative word for both of them. These are the outcasts. These are the nobodies. These are the fringes of society, which is what God says. Why did I choose you? Because you were so big and powerful and important? No, I chose you because you were nothing.
That's what you said, that linguistically is the word Hebrew and Apparu
Yep,
the same?
they're the same word. Yeah, because, and again, you asked. There are 5 gutturals in the Semitic system. Several languages reduced all of them to this one, which is really just a stop. It's the sound you make when you say, my aunt. My aunt. It's a glottal stop is all it is. So you've reduced, and this huh is one of those 5. So, and B and P, only difference is one is a stop and the other is a vocalized. Buh. And there's the R and the U shows up as that. So I say linguistically they're the same word, but that does not prove that when the Canaanite kings write those letters, oh, the Hebrews are attacking us. Not necessarily. Are the Hebrews part of all that's going on? Almost certainly. Okay. The Hebrews, the people traveled eastward, the text says, to the land of Shinar. This is the Persian Gulf, in case you wondered. This is the Euphrates. And this is the Tigris. Ararat is up there. Here is the land of Shinar. Again, I won't go into this one, but it is linguistically the same as the Akkadian Sumer. Sumer is the world's first civilization. As I say on the sheet, the list of their inventions is simply stunning. They invented writing. And it can be successfully argued that all of the written languages of Europe and Asia are descended from this one beginning. They invented the wheel. Middle Americans never got around to figuring out wheels. The Mayas, the Aztecs, the Incans never figured it out. It's like all inventions. Once somebody figures it out, oh, it's obvious. Mm-hmm. And it goes on. The dome, soldering, sailboats, these people, and we have no idea where they come from. I mean, historically speaking. Their language is unlike any other, except maybe Finnish. So they traveled eastward to the land of Shinar. Where did the Sumerians come from? Well, they came from up there. And there can be a pretty good argument made that, again, historically speaking, these people, their origins are up in the Caucasus area. One of the things that is characteristic eventually of the Sumerians are temple towers called ziggurats. And you've got a staircase going up called ziggurats. There's some reason to believe that they got started because when archaeologists look, there seem to be abandoned temples in each level. So that the thought is maybe as this one deteriorated, they didn't want to tear it down. It's sacred. So they covered it up and built another one on top. And maybe that's where it came from. Don't know that for sure. This top temple was painted blue, and it was heaven. That's where the god lived. That's what the text is talking about, isn't it? They built a tower out of mud brick. They didn't have any stone, and bitumen for mortar. Mm-hmm. Yeah. These are all made out of baked mud bricks. Millions of them. Millions of baked mud bricks held together with tar.
Did they use straw like the Egyptians?
They tended to use seashells because they could get seashells from down the Persian Gulf. So, come, this is verse 4, come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens. Now, the rest of that verse gives us two reasons for doing this. What are their fears for which they make a tower whose top is heaven? Okay, one is to keep from being scattered and forgotten. does that relate to us?
And that John and Brown are good with rather than, it's like this social cohesion is a valuable thing for any society, in any government. You want to have a united people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't want to be lonely, and I don't want to be a nobody. Nothing has really changed. And how will I do that? How will I solve that problem? I guess to parrot correctly, I ought to do insignificant. How will I solve that problem? In particular, I will be God. Not that God who is, again, I hope when I'm long gone, you'll still remember a word. Not that God who is transcendent, not that God who is other than this world, not that God who can't be manipulated. No, I want a God who is here. Not merely here, though, but a God who is the world. Not merely present in the world, but is the world, because I can manipulate the world. I can be significant. I can buy a Maserati or a Lamborghini. I can spend $1 million on a car and I can be somebody. And I can buy friends. So this apparently simple little story is really profound. What are we doing? We're getting rid of this God who is not us. This God who is other than us. To whom you can only trust. And God help us surrender. You can't make him do anything. You just have to dare to believe that he's for you. Well, maybe he isn't. I mean, the snake said he isn't. The snake said he's playing his own game. He's going to use you. Honey, you're going to have to get ahead of him. And how are you going to get ahead of him? Bring him down to your level. Oh, hi, yes. But you can go up to him and you can make him bless you. He doesn't bless you, you don't give him any supper. He doesn't bless you, make him go naked. You can make God do what you want. It is said, I'm not quite as comfortable with this, but it's still said the Sumerians invented organized religion. Well, it is true that the religion they practiced is the same religion Rome practiced 3,000 years later. The Bible encounters one religion from beginning to end. And I've said it to you before, say it again. There are really only two worldviews, the biblical one and the other one. And the other one is, if there is a God, this world is it. That's the other one. Every other form of religion outside of the Bible can be traced back to that idea. The gods and this world, the divine and this world are the same. This book alone says no. God is not this world. And we ask the Hebrews, where did you get a crazy idea like that? And they say, he dragged us into it, kicking and screaming. We didn't want to believe this, but he wouldn't let us go. Now, again, in the 19th century, when Europe was sure that they were the climax of all human development, they said, well, the Jews just had a genius for religion, and they developed this idea of monotheism. To which the Jews say, hogwash. We were not geniuses in religion. We were religious knuckleheads. He made us believe this. We didn't want to. We wanted a comfortable religion like Baal or Astarte. When my wife didn't have any children, well, I wanted this fertility goddess to help her. What did this Yahweh, who's not sexual, know about anything? That's what's going on here. Now, look what God says. Verse 6. Somebody read that for us. Hepzibah isn't here. Somebody read it.
The Lord said, if as one people speaking the same language, they've begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them.
Yeah. Now, why is that a problem? I mean, does God not want humans to accomplish anything?
It gives them this ability to do evil.
Yes. Yes. Go back to chapter 6, verse 5. Somebody read that one for us.
And the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thought of his heart was only evil continually.
Every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. I think somebody was trying to make a point there, don't you? So if indeed it is possible for humans to do anything, what are they going to do? They're going to blow up the world. That's what they're going to do. So let's make that more difficult. Now, interestingly, if you're going to do science in China, what language do you have to know? English. English. English has become the scientific language of the world. Have we figured out how to overcome Babel? And to what purpose? Again, it's such a simple little story.
Yeah.
But it's so terribly, terribly profound. Now, as I said on the sheet, in the Semitic languages, the pun is the peak of all knowledge, because you can see connections between things that other clods can't see. So here's the word. That's Akkadian. Akkadian is the language of both Assyria and Babylon. They're two different dialects of this same language, Akkadian. You know what that word means? The gate of God. Good man. Good man. Bob is the gate and El is God. The Hebrews say, nah, it's not the gate of God. It's Baal, confusion. You think you found the gate to God. Actually, what you found is confusion. So, punning, you're finding a connection between things that are not obvious, that is not obvious to other people. They love to do that with names. The name sounds like, and this is what it means. And sometimes it's for good and sometimes not so good. But hey, I'll let you go after this. This is fun. Saul named his son Ishbaal. Baal means Lord. It's not necessarily pagan at this point. Eventually, it's going to become a divine name. Anyway, the Hebrews say, no. That's not what he named him. He named him Ishbosheth. What does Bosheth mean? Shame. So the man of Baal, Ish is man. The man of Baal is actually the man of shame. So again, playing with words like that is a symbol of your ability to make connections and to see reality. Okay, I'll let you go. And we will get to chapter 12 next week.